Welcome. I am Bradley Tolpen, and this is my new Facebook Live show, my training week in review. Before I get started, I want to say thank you to all my training partners and instructors. It's been another great week at Gracie Hamada St. Louis. Thank you all. I want to catch you up a little bit. Last week, when I went live, one of the things I spoke about was not getting injured. That I saw somebody get injured, or who was injured, and that one of my goals is not to be injured. And lo and behold, the first thing that happens the next morning in class, 11:30 a.m. class, not the first thing because we were training, but I went to roll. And as I went to roll, after class, my training partner, Jeff, weighs in at a cool 275 pounds. So I'm rolling with Jeff, and I'm doing a pretty good job controlling the roll. We roll for 6 minutes following class if we choose to do so. So I'm rolling with him, and I've got position, but I make a mistake. I'm going for a triangle, and I'm in the down position. I had him in my guard. He's on his knees. I'm throwing up a triangle, and Jeff is doing a great job defending the triangle. He's got his leg pressing, his hand pressing down on his knee, and I've got my leg up over his back of his neck, and I just cannot get him down far enough to seal in the deal with the triangle. And I make the mistake of throwing both my legs up around his neck, at which point he stands up and stacks me. And then I make another mistake. I roll backwards. And when I say I roll backwards, I didn't roll properly backwards. I did a backward somersault, which means I cranked my head down this way. I didn't have my hands behind me. And this 275-pound man, doing what he should be doing, rolled right on top of me, which meant that I took 275 pounds on the back of my head with my neck cranked like this, and ended up being controlled from the back. Not only did I crank my neck under a 275-pound man, I was under him, and he had my back. We immediately stopped. I tapped. I was in pain. Yeah, I couldn't even move my neck. And so I want to talk a moment about that. Whose fault was it? It was my fault. I made the mistake. It was my moves that caused my neck to be smashed under Jeff. Okay, so now I'm hurt. What am I going to do about it? Well, fortunately for me, I'm healthy and also very smart and well-versed. I started doing some cat and calf or cat and cow yoga exercises, if you're familiar with yoga. And I started to loosen up the neck a little bit. And after I did that for a little bit and I got my neck going, I went over to get some ice. We had no ice in the building, so I went to get some ice at the only place that ice was available, which is a Mexican restaurant. And I do want to give a huge shout out right now to Lifesavers at the Los Three Compadres Mexican restaurant. They gave me a big bag of ice, and I took that ice and I started doing what you should do if you have an injury. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. I started putting the ice on my neck for 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. I rested it when I got home, but I did have that show, if you remember, at the homeless shelter Tuesday evening. I did go to the show. I did perform at the homeless shelter for a birthday party, and then I went on to work at the Ethical Society of St. Louis. And believe it or not, I felt well enough to return to my education, my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu education the next morning. Yeah, I was out for how long? I was out for the time it took me to tap out, and less than 24 hours later, I was back inside the dojo working out again. So let's go back to some concepts and techniques. The school is owned by J.W. Wright, who has just been promoted to a 4th degree black belt, which in the old days we would all say Master Wright. He's asked us not to call him Master Wright. He's my friend. He is still Professor Wright, J.W. J.W. spent the week teaching his classes lots of side control escapes. And side control has position 1, position 2, and never position 3, because that's considered kesakatami. And while he was teaching these escapes, he emphasized, 1, not to allow your head to be trapped. That's kesakatami. And the second thing was understanding our bodies have 2 lines, the shoulders and the hips. And these 2 lines are connected by 1 line, the spine. And what we need to know in order to effectively escape being controlled from a side mount or side control position is which part of our body can we move. We have to know what's free to move. Are our shoulders free? Are our hips free? It depends on the position. And depending on the position, you might actually have to work counterintuitively. So JW was talking about working counterintuitively, actually having to move your shoulders before your hips. We're used to shrimping away and moving our hips. So he said sometimes you have to move counterintuitively, and you had to move that shoulder before you can move the hip. So we were working on stopping the hand from coming in by blocking the hand on the wrist and the bicep and working out of that position. You've got to know when to move back and when to move forward. So we did a lot of side control escapes. And matter of fact, we moved on to not only the escape, but to a reverse. And of course, it was very important to understand which of your attacker's arms were defending. So we've talked a little bit about that. Now, I do want to say this. I've heard the study of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu requires, quote unquote, embracing the suck. I still don't know what that means, but I can tell you, to quote our brown belt instructor Serge, it sucks to be choked. Yes, it does in fact suck to be choked. So you got to be aware of that. And I can also tell you it sucks to be smashed by men 30 to 100 pounds heavier than myself, whether they're bearing down on me in side control or on top of me in mount. It sucks to have that kind of weight coming down on you. Now, I'm heavy. I'm hovering right around 190 pounds, down about 5 pounds in the last couple of weeks. Awesome. But imagine a 220 pound, 300 pound man on top of you. That's a lot of weight. I might joke with them about them being lightweights, but honestly, I do not want to work from the bottom position in that situation. Honestly, all week, it didn't matter if I was wearing a gi or practicing no gi. I kept losing to the bigger and stronger men. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu will be able to help keep that from happening. Were there opportunities for me to win? You betcha. All I had to do was cheat. Yeah, I could have used many techniques that I know that aren't Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But before I resumed training, I guaranteed J.W. Wright that I would follow the rules and etiquette of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and his gym. Let me pause here for a moment. My mom recently asked me why so much conflict between me and the managers of other gyms, and none of that once I train at a martial arts school. Well, I told a recently promoted black belt, he's now Professor Phil Lampe, the day I resumed training, about my conversation with my mom. What did I say? Well, I told Phil that my answer to my mom's question was simple. That when we enter a martial arts dojo, school, whatever it's called, a kwan, whatever language, when we enter a martial arts academy, we leave our egos outside. We leave our egos outside the door. And that's not just the students. That's the instructors. Because nobody who is a practitioner of martial arts believes they know everything, especially about every situation. That's one of the amazing things about the martial way. And it's with that attitude we approach training. I go into a traditional gym where they're muscle building, body building, doing all sorts of other activities, dance classes, whatever. And suddenly, the personal trainers and the managers, they know everything. But they don't know what I know. And they have a problem. I don't have a problem, but their problem causes a conflict. Moving right along, though, I've known Phil since he was a white belt. And now, Professor Lampe is a business partner with JW. Together, they own Gracie Amata Wentzville. And Phil Lampe, Professor Lampe, came into Weldon Springs, St. Louis, Gracie Amata, St. Louis, and taught. And before he began class, Professor Lance Elkin spoke about etiquette, BJJ etiquette at our school, specifically about a Sadie Hawkins principle of co-ed rolling. He said, always let the woman ask the man to roll. Men should never approach a woman and ask her to roll with him. That's etiquette at Gracie Hamada. Okay, moving on to Professor Lampe's class, because after all, this is my training week in review. Professor Lampe went over the omoplata position, and how to get into the position, how to use the position. For those of you who don't know, the omoplata is a technique used to roll the shoulder and basically lock the shoulder, and you have to tap out. I first learned the omoplata at St. Charles MMA under the guidance of Mike Rogers, who also actually is a Gracie practitioner under Rodrigo Vaghi. So here's a shout out to Mike Rogers and St. Charles MMA. The omoplata, in order to get into it the way Professor Lampe was teaching it, we were doing it from the guard. We were pulling up our hips into the armpit as if we were already kind of in the triangle area. It looks like we're going for a triangle, that one leg up and whatnot. But anyway, we throw our hips up, throw one leg over the shoulder as we turn, and we lock that in. And then it's very important that the side that we are going for, the attacker's arm, is put into your pocket. So you want to keep that in the pocket to keep people from escaping the omoplata. I rolled with purple belt Steve Carlisle. I mentioned that particularly because I said something about Stephen Wyatt the other day. This, my friends, is Stephen Wyatt. That is Professor Stephen Wyatt, not purple belt Stephen Carlisle. So I rolled with Stephen Carlisle, a purple belt, not Professor Stephen Wyatt, a black belt, recently promoted by Hoyler Gracie as well. His credentials are right here on his business card, black belt in Brazilian Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, degree in exercise science, advanced personal training, and that's Stephen Wyatt. Stephen Wyatt taught the no-gi class, and Phil joked about, wouldn't it be nice if you could be a no-gi practitioner fighting or rolling with somebody who was forced to wear a gi? Doesn't happen that way. Anyway, Professor Wyatt taught a no-gi class, and we did a lot of basic wrestling. We did a lot of working on pummeling. In other words, underhook and overhook. Working and getting, trying to fight for our underhook. So we had an underhook and an overhook, and we kept pummeling. And we went from pummeling to taking the back, different ways to take the back. So there's a lot of basic wrestling, including the collar and arm for takedowns. I did a lot of that. So that was a lot of fun that I got to do in the no-gi class. Having said all that, I went to the open mat and competition training on Sunday. And when I went to the open mat and competition training on Sunday, I rolled with a man by the name of Floyd Helton. I've also known Floyd a very long time. He is a carpenter by trade. He's built like a rock, and he's strong as a bear. And yes, he kept me pinned down a lot in side control. I kept escaping, but I didn't keep advancing. I kept escaping, but I didn't advance. So I ended up getting caught by him. We had a great roll. I got a chance to talk to the man, who happens to be a father of 3 boys that all excel in wrestling. 2 of them have just advanced. They're young. If you want to look up the Helton boys, and one of them is now wrestling at Missouri Baptist. Anyway, I talked to my friend Floyd after our roll, and one of the things that I realized as he was grabbing my bicep and saying he's just waiting to see if there was a twitch on my bicep was that I could use a little more strength. I do need to start training strength. One of my goals is to increase my strength now. But we also talked about slowing our roll down to a speed where we can remember the entire roll. Whether it's 6 minutes or 7 minutes in length, remember every move you make so that you can make yourself better. He kept getting the better of me, because he was able to get that arm past my head, either over my head or beyond my head, putting me in danger of techniques like a Kimura and Americana. And regardless of all those escapes that I learned earlier in the week, I didn't get the reverse in, and at one point he tried to get my back. I moved well, we were on our feet for a while, but in the end, I needed to do better, and it was a pleasure to work with Floyd Helton. Had a good time. By the way, we talked to also about things that had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. It's a jiu-jitsu family, by the way. And he was one of the men who came in and worked on the St. Louis Aquarium down at Union Station, because I was talking about having done the Santa Claus gig for the Polar Express the entire season last year. So that was cool. I didn't need to buy a calendar. I didn't need any calendars. I bought this calendar when I was in Arizona back in, I guess it was October and November. And as you can see, I'm actually paying attention to my training. But I have this calendar here. This calendar here that I got, the new grip calendar, which supports helping women who are victims of human trafficking. It's their mission. And so this is the first annual Women's Empowerment Showcase calendar. And I bought it. This is Ann Knibe. She is the person who sold me the calendar. That, by the way, that's Ann Knibe, and that is the man himself, Professor J.W. Wright. And Ann is getting ready to go up to Minneapolis to do a seminar on March 12th. I've known her in a long time. JW and Ann actually came to my 4th of July party. She is also the calendar girl for next month. Today's the last day of February. Next month is March, and Ann Knibe is the calendar woman for the new grip calendar, and you can buy a calendar in. But I'm just going to talk about this calendar for just one more moment. So there is a man who apparently stole a calendar from a woman. These calendars cost $10. It doesn't matter about the calendar itself or my $10, because the $10 was a donation. What's sad is the person the calendar went to reportedly was a woman, and reportedly a man stole her calendar. I didn't need to buy a calendar. I didn't need to give a calendar away. I didn't need to give anybody calendars. This is a donation to a new grip. Okay, I'm going to finish real quickly now. I've gone way over my 15 minutes. I want to give a shout out to a couple other people. One of them has nothing to do with Gracie Amato. He's a Facebook friend. His name is Matt Brown. He is a strong man. He is chiseled. He is cut. He used to run a gym by the name of Sweat, I think, in Clayton. I think he trained a friend of mine's son at that gym. I think he's known by a lot of people, Matt Brown. He's a motivator. He speaks about being a person of your word, doing what you say you're going to do, not doing what you say you're not going to do. And I appreciate his insight online. So I do want to give a shout out to Matt Brown for that reason. And I want to say the same thing about John Gaston. I haven't met John Gaston. He now has Empower Martial Arts. He's out of Springfield, but now has opened a second school down in Florida. And Hanche John Gaston also. Just his words online, on Facebook, have just been amazingly motivating and inspirational. So I want to give shout outs to those two, even though I haven't met them, and one of them has nothing to do with Gracie Amato. Hanche Gaston is actually also a student of Professor Wright. Finally, money matters. I just got a new tooth. That's right. I just spent $2,160 for a tooth today, and another $2,500 last year for the implant itself. So I've got $5,000 in one tooth in my mouth. So if you want to set up a GoFundMe to help me pay for my dental bills, go for it. I will use the money to pay for my dental bills. Or if you want to sponsor me or this program, my Training Week in Review, thank you. Send me a direct message and we'll get together and we'll figure out how I can promote your company and earn some money, because face it, we all need money, especially me, if you know anything about my last 10 years. Finally, there's another way you can support me. It's the way that I've been talking about for years. Hire me. What do I do for a living? I'm in the entertainment industry. I am an actor, writer, journalist, editor, director. It's not hogwash. It's true. I do all those things. Well, I thank all of you for taking the time and the extra 15 minutes for this episode of my Training Week in Review, where I talk about my training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the people who I train with and the instructors, the techniques, etc. Once again, here's a shout out to Professor Stephen Wyatt, taught the no-gi class, and to the owner, J.W. Wright and Ann Knaib, who are heading up to Minnesota to teach up there. Remember, it's Monday nights, 8:30 p.m., my training week in review, and I was intending 15 minutes. I ran 30. Have a great day. Be well. Stay healthy. Sei gesund. Be well.